The flood, also known as the parasite or the shaping sickness by the ancient humans, is a highly virulent species of parasitic organisms that reproduce and grow by consuming life forms with significant biomass and cognitive capacity. During the 300-year Forerunner Flood War, they were responsible for consuming the majority of sentient life in the galaxy, particularly the Forerunners. The Flood is the most variable faction in the trilogy, capable of infecting and mutating humans and Covenant species such as Sing'Aile and Jiralhanae into combat forms. They are regarded as the greatest threat to all life, or, more accurately, biodiversity, in the Milky Way galaxy. When the Forerunner Precursor War ended, the few remaining precursors who had been pushed beyond the galaxy's boundaries onto the path Chthonius sought vengeance on the Forerunners. The Forerunners saved a few precursors, while others turned into dust that could regenerate into their previous forms. This dust became so contaminated over time that it could only cause horrible illnesses and mutations. Enraged by their creation's rebellion, the Forerunners welcomed this corruption and became a part of it, transforming themselves into the Flood to destroy the Forerunners as a final act of retaliation. They sent several ships carrying this dust to planets controlled by the Forerunners. The Flood is a parasitic life form that is extremely adaptable, dangerous, and expendable. They were discovered in the Milky Way galaxy 10,000 years before the Forerunner Flood War by an advanced human empire. The earliest known instance of the highly infectious viral supercell, later dubbed the Flood form, was discovered in a fine, desiccated powder encased in cylinders. This powder was actually remnants of a precursor. The first tests revealed the possibility of psychotropic effects at some lower levels, but not in humans or Santium. The primary animals affected were popular human household pets. The Feru, lively and amiable creatures found on Phron Hacker. Small amounts of the dust induced changes in the Feru that improved their domestic behavior. Santium soon adopted the practice of keeping Feru as pets. Humans and Santium have reared and powdered these animals without incident for centuries. Nonetheless, the powder quickly latched onto key points in the Feru's genes and began reshaping them, resulting in a strange growth on 1/3 of the powdered Feru. Between the pet's shoulders, a fluffy, loose fur developed. Other Feru were soon discovered grazing on these companions, devouring their fur and, on rare occasions, consuming the animals themselves. This was unusual because Feru were herbivores by nature. This seemed to set off some sort of expansion signal. The Feru soon began to produce much less appealing growths. Floppy striped rods sprouted from their heads and were devoured by their fellow Feru, resulting in miscarriages and unnatural births. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg. The Flood spread from the Feru to humans, particularly those who ate the Feru for food. These new vectors compelled their fellow humans to consume infected tissue, infecting everything they touched. Whatever they discarded, such as limbs and tissue, could spread the infection over time. The Flood continued to mutate and evolve, and it fought against both the ancient human empire and the Santium. Unbeknownst to the Forerunners, the Human-Santium alliance had devised a method to combat and eventually defeat the Flood. The humans were capable of disrupting the resulting Flood by tampering with key strands of the Flood's genetic accumulation and implanting 1/3 of the human population with this code, then planting them directly along the Flood's path. As a result, the Flood began to rip itself apart on a galactic scale, stretching the Human-Santium genetic weapon to its breaking point and prompting the Flood to obliterate itself. With the knowledge that it was doomed, the remaining stable, uninfected specimens fled the galaxy aboard a hijacked ship and lay dormant for thousands of years, buying time. The Forerunners became aware of the threat and, as a precautionary measure, designed and built the Halo network in case the threat resurfaced. The Flood reappeared 10,000 years later and resumed their quest for total galactic dominance. After exhausting all other strategic options, the Halo array was activated, resulting in the eradication of the original source of the Flood plague as well as the annihilation of all sentient beings in the galaxy, effectively eradicating both the source and its entire food supply. In the absence of a Gravemind, the Flood were relatively stable. Due to their inability to coordinate their efforts, the Flood would then spawn and spread spontaneously by infecting sentient life forms, specifically those self-aware and capable of introspection. This stage of a Flood outbreak is referred to as the feral stage. During the feral stage, the Flood can only organize locally using pheromone-based messages. According to research, the content of such messages is of very limited complexity. Individual combat and transport forms have access to their host's abilities and memories, However, once an outbreak establishes a viable gravemind, the coordinated stage begins, and it is at this point that the flood becomes a threat. The absorbed intelligence and memories of the consumed hosts become part of a collective awareness that can think strategically and overpower the individual forms of the flood in an orchestrated manner with the formation of a gravemind. A gravemind, like the proto-gravemind from which it evolved, is the result of the union of pure flood supercells and the neurosystem complexes of hundreds or thousands of sentient creatures. Its control over the more mobile forms it creates is analogous to an entity's control over its own limbs. Thus, control is located at the individual level during the feral stage, but once an outgrowth enters the coordinated stage, control is assumed and transmitted from the composite central intelligence. Although few data from any properly controlled experiment are available, data collected in the field suggests that, if a mobile form is removed from the influence of the gravemind that coordinates its source group, it will regress to a feral stage. There is insufficient data to determine whether the mobile forms of one gravemind would be swayed by the mobile forms of another gravemind, though logic predicts that this would be the case. Nonetheless, because the individual graveminds are nearly identical and all fight for the same goal, it is likely that distinguishing one from the other will be nearly impossible. According to the bestiarium, the flood society resembles a utopian socialist ideal as there is no wealth, no poverty, no want, no crime, and no disease. Every individual works for the advancement of the flood as a whole. He also says, it is unfortunate that their one overriding goal is to butcher and consume every other life form in the galaxy. The flood, a virulent species with parasitic origins, is an anomaly in normal life and an outlier in all known biology. This can be explained by the fact that it is an extragalactic species originating in a different galaxy. It is extremely adaptable and mutates to hosts through various stages of accelerated evolution, in which the biomatter body accelerates its own evolution to the point of massive biological breakdown, allowing infection to occur first. Although the species can replicate without host bodies, it is depicted as a hopeless endeavor that is only carried out by flood forms. Flood reproduction and survival are only known to occur through infesting and assimilating other species. They accomplish this through lysogenic reproduction, a type of cellular replication in which viral cells contaminate host cells with their own genetic code, mutating the host cells into viral forms. Although the Mgalak Golo and Yanmia are presumably ignored as biomass, the flood reassimilate almost every conceivable species to their cause. The former is too small and lacks a central nervous system, while the latter has a chitinous body that is calcium deficient. Cortana witnessed a flood kneading the corpses of Singali and Ungoi in the corners of one of their hangars during the flood's takeover of Truth and Reconciliation. The flood can survive harsh environments ranging from -75 to +53 degrees Celsius, and even underwater in its early stages of life, and it can withstand the harsh environments of all major known colonized planets. Apparently, the flood can infest any living organism, but they prefer hosts with a high brain power to hasten the formation and expansion of the gravemind hive's intelligence and the flood's intelligence as a whole. They are only as intelligent as the creatures they infect. The flood will be more lethal the more cunning the enemy. As the flood spreads and replicates, it alters the environment to better suit its needs. This manifests itself as biomass growing on any suitable surface and spores filling the air. This appears to be a natural part of the flood life cycle, and it leads to the development of gravemind as well as flood hive. The flood appears to thrive in humid and damp environments, which contributes to the fact that the quarantine zone is devoid of organic life and is cold and consistently snowy, impeding the flood's development. Infection forms specifically target other species with sentient intelligence and sufficient biomass, and they can infest living or lightly injured corpses. Long tendrils from infection forms perforate the host skin and reach the spinal cord. They then sync with the host, matching frequencies with the host's nervous system and killing them almost instantly. From there, they take control of the host body, replacing whatever mind was previously present with the ravenous and hungry psyche of the flood, though certain higher-level cognitive abilities, such as combat techniques and technical knowledge, are preserved. Despite the clinging of certain memories, no trace of the parent mind's personality remains. Following infection, the organism is driven solely by a primitive and simplistic desire to assimilate or eliminate other species. In rare cases, such as when flood seeks highly specific information from a person's mind, they use an unspecified method of infestation that does not kill the host outright. This allows the flood to burrow into the host's mind, eventually giving them access to all of the host's memories. This was only recently seen when the Flood sought information from Captain Jacob Keyes, such as the location of Earth or a starship that could transport them away from Installation 04. Furthermore, if the infection form initiating assimilation is severely aged or otherwise damaged, the host's death can be eliminated entirely. Private Wallace Jenkins survived such a fate, remaining alive and fully aware of his situation despite his body's mutation, even displaying limited control over his body when the Flood urges were inactive. While the neurological assimilation of reference is the same regardless of host species, the Flood's infection includes species-specific physiological mutilation. Upper-level combatants, such as humans, Jiralhanae, and Sangheili, are specifically infected to become combat forms. Although heavily mutated, combat forms retain the general profile of their original species. Organ systems have been corrupted, organ-specific functions have been decentralized, and body cavities have been degraded, making selective hitbox incapacitation impossible. Because organ functions are decentralized, beheading does not result in the death of a combat form. Furthermore, highly area-specific munitions, such as sniper rifle projectiles, are completely ineffective because eliminating selective areas of a combat form does not result in large-scale physiological impediments, and the projectile will quickly pass through spoiled flesh, exiting through the opposite side of the combat form with no consequences.